There's no doubt you've heard of Jack Daniel's whiskey. Jack Daniel's is the fourth best-selling spirit in the world by value, making it the best-selling American spirit. But how many of you are aware that an orphan boy invented it? How many of you know an enslaved black person whose contribution was afterward erased from all records for decades? What do you know about number 7 printed on the bottle? Well, in this video, we are going to talk about the parentless boy who created Jack Daniel's whiskey, his real story, and when the orphan and the enslaved black person got together to create Jack Daniel's. If you care to know the real story behind the most famous whiskey brand in the history of America, then make sure to keep watching, subscribe to my channel, and hit the bell icon to be the first to get the best business success stories, information, and updates. Jack Daniel, the 10th child of his parents, was born around 1850 and quickly lost his mother because of complications after labor. His father married again, but he died when Jack was just 12 years old. As his brothers served in the army, his sisters got married and his stepmother considered remarriage. The kid had little choice but to leave his home at age 15. Jack was taken in by Dan Core, a local preacher and moonshine manufacturer. Dan's distillery was more minor than others run by folks who owned some farmland nearby. When he noticed the new child at home had a strong interest in whiskey, Dan wanted to teach Jack a valuable lesson. Dan Core was holding one trump card. The family had a few enslaved black people who refused to leave, even after the Civil War ended. Nearest Green, the master distiller of Dan's Still, was now charged with teaching the little child, Jack Daniel, the basics of distillation. Meanwhile, Daniel sold the property he inherited from his father and acquired a property near Lynchburg at the base of a limestone cliff. He co-founded a massive distillery with his mentor Dan. Limestone filtered water is considered a superior ingredient in good whiskey, and the new distillery had good access to it. No question about the master distiller for the new product. While Near Green made good whiskey in the latest still, Jack Daniel's traveled far and wide to sell the products. There are several rumors regarding his number 7, and we'll review them later in this video, but according to one rumor, that number was named after his first registered distillery number, which was poised to change when the government reorganized the revenue district and slapped a new number on the distillery. But Daniel could not afford to rename his whiskey, as many customers had by now associated its superior taste with its name. You can't change horses mid-ride. Daniel found a solution by renaming his whiskey Old Number 7. Well, that worked. He also chose a square-shaped bottle for his new whiskey, which he thought would stand for fairness and dignity. Jack Daniel's whiskey grew in popularity and won the gold medal for finest whiskey at the St. Louis World Fair in 1904, but tough times were ahead. Daniel was already weak in health when the temperance movement gained strength in the US. He entrusted the whiskey production to two of his nephews, Lem Motlow and Dick Daniel, in 1907, besides hiring the children of Negris, his old master distiller. He now wanted to distance himself from the whiskey world, but sadly he could not do so for long. Poor old Jack Daniel, the legend who started his life as an orphan, soon met a painful death when he came to his office one day and found he had forgotten the combination to open his safe. Frustrated, he kicked the iron safe hard and got his foot wounded. According to a few accounts, the wound soon went septic, and he finally gave in. The iron safe is a showpiece in the distillery now. When dry days hit the US, Jack Daniel's Tennessee whiskey had to remain underground. But after 1993, when Prohibition was repealed, the whiskey returned to the market, though not hurriedly. After the death of Lem Motlow, Daniel's nephew, the distillery was left to his children, who promptly sold it to Brown-Forman in 1956. When you hear the name Jack Daniel, the famous whiskey might come to mind. But you hear the name Nathan Nearest Green? The New York Times published an article in 2016 on the distiller's secret ingredient, assistance from a slave. The company officially confirmed in the report that an enslaved man, Nearest Green, taught Jack how to make whiskey. Scholars, academics, and journalists have gathered in Lynchburg, Tennessee, hoping to learn more about a guy who had previously featured as a mere appendage in the story of the country's most recognized whiskey brand. Uncovering Nearest, a short documentary, was released in 2020. They wanted this generation to understand more about green, since so many enslaved Africans and Black Americans' voices and faces have been muted or erased from American history texts and historical tourism sites. Victoria Butler, Green's great-great-granddaughter, said she hoped her grandmother could see the whiskey. She said the idea of making a whiskey with her ancestor's name came from a member of Jack Daniel's family first, and then from her. "They were like me. What can we do to keep Green's legacy alive?" she said. And one family member said, "Let's put his name on the bottle." "Every time you take a sip, you should be telling the story of Nearest," she said. "That's how we will make sure that his legacy is cemented and it continues beyond us to the next generation." 3 of Green's descendants still work at Jack Daniel's distillery, but Weaver said she doesn't consider them competitors. "When we go into the marketplace, we are selling Uncle Nearest," she said. "But we are talking about Jack in a way that makes you want to drink Jack Daniel's as well." To recognize Jack Daniel's name, you don't have to be a whiskey expert. You don't have to be a drinker to recognize Jack Daniel's name. It's a well-known American brand. And in my opinion, the relatively recent discovery of Uncle Nearest has enhanced the history of that brand. Around 275,000 people each year visit Jack Daniel's distillery in Lynchburg, Tennessee. During their tour, they are presented a straightforward tale about Mr. Jack Daniel, a story that neglects certain crucial aspects. The previous story is that when Jack Daniel was a kid in the 1850s, he worked for a preacher, grocer, and distiller named Dan Call. Call recognized Jack's talent and showed him how to make whiskey. The rest is history. Here's the real story. An enslaved man named Nathan Nearest Green taught Jack the basics of running Call's whiskey still. After learning from Green, Jack worked with Call to create his brand and sell the whiskey. Call sold the business to then 20-year-old Jack for $25 after being forced to choose between whiskey and religion. Green and his family stayed with Jack once he took over the business. Jack Daniel's Distillery's first master distiller was the first known African-American master distiller in the United States. Many of Green's descendants are still employed at the distillery today. For a long time, no one acknowledged Green's part in the growth of Jack Daniel's whiskey brand. In 2016, a journalist called Clay Risen set out to alter that with a New York Times article headlined "Jack Daniel's Embraces a Hidden Ingredient, Help from a Slave." This article was written around the time of Jack Daniel's 150th anniversary. In an interview with Gastropod, Risen stated that it wasn't a secret that Green assisted Jack Daniel in building his brand, but it wasn't spoken about in any realistic context. Risen's story touched Fawn Weaver, an African-American businesswoman, author, and historian who stumbled across it while traveling around Singapore. The experience of reading it and learning about Nearest Green, according to Weaver, was mind-boggling. She also stated that while it is commonly known that African Americans have been involved in developing many famous businesses for decades, it is not always possible to identify a specific person and discover their name and position. Weaver was so moved by Risen's work and the story of Nearest Green that she co-founded the Nearest Green Foundation. The founder states in the About section of the Foundation's website that the group works to uphold and share Nearest Green's legacy with the world. Although it was forgotten, the Foundation members have taken it upon themselves to guarantee that it never happens again. How does the Nearest Green Foundation go about achieving this goal? Establishing scholarship opportunities, researching available Nearest Green's life and work, and emphasizing historical preservation through local monuments. Green is also the subject of a short film made by the organization, which Emmy Award-winning actor Jeffrey Wright narrates. Those interested in viewing it and learning more about Green can do so below. Jack Daniel's is the world's 4th best-selling spirit, making it the best-selling American spirit. In the past, nobody understood why. The number 7 is on the bottle of Jack Daniel's, and there are 3 famous rumors. Daniel had 7 girlfriends, the number 7 train transported his barrels, and he lost one of his prized whiskey barrels for 7 years. Unfortunately, Jack is the only one who knows the truth. While it is widely known that Jack Daniel's is made in a dry country, you may legally purchase bottles of Jack Daniel's at the distillery tour. The whiskey inside the commemorative bottle, a loophole established in state law, is free. Frank Sinatra was buried with a bottle of Jack Daniel's whiskey, a pack of Camel cigarettes, a Zippo lighter, and $1 worth of dimes. Over 250,000 people per year pilgrimage to Jack Daniel's distillery. After a $103 million expansion in 2013, Jack Daniel's announced a further $140 million investment in their distillery and tourist center just 3 years later in February 2016. Jack Daniel's is a Tennessee whiskey as opposed to a bourbon because the whiskey goes through a charcoal mellowing process while it is still moonshine or white lightning. The shine drips through the homemade sugar maple charcoal for 10 to 12 days. Then it heads to the barrel to age just like bourbon. It's a process Jack learned from the Lutheran minister Dan Core. Jack Daniel's has always had a history of being connected to music. When Daniel opened the White Rabbit and Red Dog saloons in Lynchburg, he drafted 13 of his employees to form the band that would perform at the venues, naming them the Jack Daniel's Original Silver Cornet Band. Jack Daniel's is the second best-selling whiskey among travelers at duty-free shops around the world, 889,000 cases per year, and the third most popular overall, behind only Johnnie Walker and Absolut Vodka. Jack Daniel's possibly died miserably. Unable to remember the combination to the safe in his office, he kicked it in frustration, breaking his toe and forming an infection that would kill him 6 years later. The condition would never have occurred if he had just doused his toe in whiskey shortly after breaking it. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Don't forget to smash the like button and subscribe to the channel to be the first to watch the following videos.